Why won't the vocabulary that you learn stick? There are so many programs and people that will promise you to learn 50 words a day or 100 words a week, and those programs work.
Only for a short time. What's up, guys? Welcome to Wide World Friends English. Today we're going to just get into this active vocabulary recall and how can you do it in a non-gimmicky way. What are some real strategies to actually recall words well, to take words from your passive vocabulary, put them into your active vocabulary, and just build them out at all so that you can express yourself more freely?
It's great to spend hours a day studying vocabulary, but if you can never actually implement that vocabulary into some tests or into your language or into the things that you produce in English, then all that time has been basically wasted.
So first we need to start with memory. Why doesn't memorizing tons of words, just cramming it into your mind, why doesn't it stick?
Well, part of it is that as you begin to learn words, you mainly use things that you can touch, see, smell, taste, hear, these sensory kind of words around you, physical, spatial words, and it's really good for your memory. You can touch them, you can hear them, you can taste them, and that's really, really good for your short-term memory.
Technically, sensory memory only lasts a few seconds, but repeated exposure to things using your senses initially helps you build different connections to that word. You will notice that in school, you start taking those words and new words and you start to answer questions. There's this question-answer format that you have to use. You're taught words that you have to memorize, but then you have to use them in different ways. This is building your short-term memory.
It's those multiple choice questions, right? It's, do you know the word or not? And this is one way to build vocabulary, but not a way to build vocabulary that it sticks. And that's what this video is about, is try to get those words. Let's not waste that time, all that precious time you've spent to try to then memorize them, especially because a big problem comes down to as you increase in your fluency, those words become a lot less tangible than the words you previously learned. And so you don't have the sensory method that you can use to study things like ethereal. How do you study that word if you're trying to feel something whose literally its definition is something that is not feelable?
Yeah, you attach it to feelings and nuances, and everybody who's advanced knows the struggle with nuances because the feeling that a word gives to an ESL learner is not going to be the same as the feeling it gives to a native speaker. So today we're going to focus on 5 things that you can do to work on building out that vocabulary, getting it from your short-term memory into your long-term memory so that you can use it actively. But I will warn you, if you don't engage these words that you are learning often, they just go right into your passive vocabulary. They become familiarly unfamiliar. They're just kind of out there. You know you've seen it before, you've seen it around, you know it's English, but can you use it? Maybe you recognize it, but you can't use it. This is your passive vocabulary.
So most of a person's vocabulary is going to be passive. A large part of what we produce, even as native speakers, is a small fraction when compared to the passive vocabulary that we can recognize. This is the struggle with reading and consuming and listening versus actually speaking and writing. That listening is testing that passive vocabulary. Can you recognize these words? That speaking is, okay, let's produce those words. And that obviously is much more difficult. How can we convert some of these passive into the active so that then we can sound more fluent and be better understood, especially in these kind of more intangible vocabulary terms?
I can't tell you how many words that even I know just by association or by context, but I don't know the exact definition. There's a lot. I could recognize a good piece of the dictionary because I'm an English teacher and I'm a writer, but that doesn't mean I can just pull it up and use it in my speaking all the time. Maybe doing something slower where I'm producing language more slowly by writing. Yes, I can tell you my writing vocabulary is far more broad than my speaking vocabulary, which is interesting because as a writer, I am engaging different vocabulary sets. In a way, there's a lot of overlap, but there is a bit of a difference. And so for you trying to express yourself, you need to work on building up the things that you need to express yourself at multiple levels.
Before we get into the tips, if you think about it, this is a very natural and very healthy part of learning a language, because you don't know exactly how much weight a word carries. You don't know how common that word's going to be. You are presented with a word and you don't know how often I'm going to use this. So you put it into your passive vocabulary until you start getting these repetitions and these repeated instances of engagement with this term. And then you suddenly realize, this is one of those things I need to use. I need to keep, I need to stick around. And so I can then use it and engage with it. If I'm not going to use it, then I don't need to be able to produce it as often.
Right, but you're not actively making that decision yourself. You're not consciously making that decision. You learn by environment, by exposure, the things that you need to use more often.
All of that kind of boils down to you have to use the word. In order to make a word stick, you have to actually use it. That's reminding your brain, hey, this is a word that I'm going to use for a long time, so get used to it and produce it. And you got to remind your hand, I'm going to be writing or typing this word often, so I better be able to produce it.
And then after that, you've got to be doing it in spaced intervals. The easiest way to do this is to make it part of your lifestyle. Part of one of the things that you talk about, not about the word, but the topic that the word appears in the most. You need to be using it and engaging it often, because if you're not finding reasons to use it every now and then you're definitely not going to remember it for the long term. It's just going to move right into passive.
So use it a lot and then kind of slow down and kind of space it out a little bit, but have still that repeated engagement.
Right. So here are 5 ideas to help you begin to intentionally get these words and add them to your active vocabulary. Number 1 is to associate the word with a story, whether the story of the origin of the word or a story in which you find it or a type of story that you hear it in a lot. Writers tend to have words they really favor or they really like. Speakers do too. They could become like catchphrases. That's where like a phrase becomes like something a person says way more than everybody else. But there's also words that people like. Like Josh really likes the word ethereal. It's a term that he uses more often than an average person would because he likes the term, he likes the sound, he likes what it means, and he finds reasons to use it, to discuss it in the topics that he likes to discuss. But for Josh, this is a very active word. For lots of people, they wouldn't recognize it except by context or by the topic being discussed. And so this is something that for Josh is a very active word. He could just pull it out of nowhere. He can write with it. He doesn't have to look it up. But there are other people that might have to say, what does that mean? From an ESL standpoint, these could be words that are actually very common, like integrate or exacerbate or exasperate. Things that we do use, probably not like with our children, but we do use it quite often as adults. These are words that are really important to know and to have in your active vocabulary, but if you don't have any association with them in terms of the story or the topics that you should use them in, then it's going to be hard to use them.
Number 2 is to set a timer and have that timer remind you of the regular interval to engage with this term. On my phone for a long time, I had an app that would do this for me, which was really convenient, even though I'm more of a physical flashcard kind of person. On my phone, it would regularly remind me, say, hey, it's been this long since you memorized these terms. And that was a really good way. It was an easy way. I didn't have to measure the time. I didn't have to do a Gantt chart or anything like that. It would bring up the oldest words or the words that needed to be studied at that interval.
This is mainly a way to help make your short-term memory get a little bit more into long-term. Now, don't focus so much on the definitions of the words in this case. You're not memorizing for the definition as much as you're memorizing for synonyms, which is a great way to practice.
And that means try to use them into natural conversations. Don't try to just do the flashcard sets, but try to use that word that you haven't used in a long time, like ethereal, and try to use that in a new context with a conversation with a person that it may be a little awkward, but it's time to bring that word back up so that you can then remember it.
Another way that you can practice your vocabulary, bringing them from passive to active, is you need to be working on writing short pieces with them. It might be just a few sentences, but the point is that you are using the word. Try to do this at least once a week for a little bit until you start to get to where you can effortlessly recall the word.
Number 4 is teach that word to somebody else. So apparently my affinity for the word ethereal has become quite popular. So I was able to teach that word to other people. And if they, who don't know what that word is, can then teach it to other people, then it would help that person to know what that word means. By teaching, it helps you learn.
When you teach something, you kind of get this sense of responsibility where you need to do a really good job. So you seek first to really understand a term and how to use it before you pass it on to someone else, because you don't want to teach the wrong thing. This is actually a brilliant learning exercise because you really have to learn and work and understand a word from multiple angles so that you can then present it to a student or to your friend, and then they would have to come back at you with questions. Oh, can I use it this way? Can I use it this way? And then you're having to determine whether they're using it correctly or incorrectly, which is fantastic for you as a language learner. Anytime that you are teaching something that you are really working to set what you know into stone.
I can't tell you how many times a person will say that they know a word that they just said or a word somebody else said. Somebody will lean over and say, do you know what they just said? Like, what was that? What does that mean? Oh yeah, I know what they said. They say, what does that mean? And immediately their brain like blanks and they're just like, I don't know what that word means. I can't really describe that word to you. I don't know how to explain that word. And immediately they have to start combing into all the details to find out what this word means so they can then teach that word to somebody else.
Right, because it's passive, not active for them. The fifth tip is to meditate for a few minutes on the words that you learned that day. Now, we are big on not learning a ton of words. I would not learn any more than 8. At the beginner level, maybe you could go 10 or a little bit more, maybe. Ideally, as an advanced learner, you're not learning more than 5 to 8 words at a time because of how interconnected you need to make your understanding of that word, especially words that you're trying to make active. You shouldn't be working on a ton of words at the same time. Instead, stick to 5 to 8 words or less, and then meditate on them. Think about what they mean. Think about the ways that you use that word. Come up with a new way to use that word in your mind in terms of making a new sentence. The goal here is that you are making your mind speak the word. You're making your mind think of the word and use it in here. If you can get your inside voice to use the term well and to recall it well, then you're going to be able to get your mouth to follow soon after.
Yeah, it's just a way that you can reflect on these ideas. Words aren't just words, they're ideas communicated. Like she's saying, it's a really great way to train your brain to be using these things in English so that you can be able to recall them, so that you can be able to use them. And that's what this is about. We have a very large passive vocabulary. I know that word, and we're trying to figure out how can we use that word, and a large part of it is it starts up here.
All right, guys, those are 5 tips to help you get those words from passive to active, to work on remembering terms so that you can use them. We're going to dive into this more in other ways in future videos, but for now, I want you guys to try to take that and practice it for a bit, and then come back and comment and let us know how it's going. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.